Hello, everyone. It's delightful to be with you, even on a day that is not really associated with delight. This day, the 26th of Nisan this year, and the 11th day of the Omer, is Yom HaShoah, or Yom HaZikaron L'Shoah U'Legvura, the day of memorial or remembering the Holocaust and Gvura, which is, as you may have noticed, the quality that we are centered on this week. And Gvura, as Rabbi Mark translated it as resistance, it's also associated with strength and heroism. But we're going to look at some other valences of Gvura today, because if you had the opportunity, and I highly recommend you read the beautiful teaching on Gvura for this week by Rabbi Sam Feinsmith that was sent out to the IJS list. He talks about Gvura there as setting limits and boundaries. But today I'd like to think of Gvura in another way, which is experiencing limits and boundaries. Gvura is also not just what we are in power of doing in terms of deciding what should be limited, but also experiencing and engaging the real limitations, judgment, consequences, suffering, difficulty in our own lives. That is also Gvura. And today is specifically Netzach Shebgvura. And Netzach is literally in Hebrew, eternity. And so Netzach in Gvura is about that which endures and lasts and continues and persists even in suffering and limitation. And so you can see how, in a way, Netzach Shebegvura is literally bashert. It's perfect for this day when we remember those who were murdered and who suffered and who found themselves in tremendous limitation and adversity. And yet, as we remember them today, they endure. They continue. And so what I'm hoping is our practice today will allow us to focus on how to persist and be resilient and to grow, and also to ask what endures even in Gvura. I'd like to share with you a short teaching by the Sfat Emet, the Hasidic Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Alter. And he says that on every Passover, right, because the Omer system begins at Passover, when we limit our intake, we stop eating any chametz, any leavening. On every Passover, a Jew becomes like a new person, like the newborn child each of us was as we came forth from Egypt. The implanted by God within our hearts is renewed. That point is called lechem oni, or poor people's bread, another name for matzah, because it is totally without expansion. Our task is really to expand that point, to draw all our deeds to follow it. This is our job throughout the year, for better or worse, but this holiday of matzot is the time when the point itself is renewed, purified from any defilement. And so here we can see that Passover, or Pesach, is a new start where we try to eliminate all that has clogged our spiritual lives up and begin to grow new growth from just this tiny point. Maybe our Tselem Elokim, our divine image, or our Neshama Tohora, our pure soul. we are growing it towards revelation, towards receiving Torah on Shavuot, because this whole counting of the Omer is not only a journey through these midot, through these essential qualities, but it's also the journey from liberation to opening and receiving, from leaving the old, but opening up and receiving the new. And my teacher, really my main teacher for this past year that I've returned to over and over again, are the journals of a woman named Etty Hillesum. And I want to teach in her name today. Etty was a 20-something cosmopolitan living in Nazi-occupied Amsterdam. She was eventually murdered at Auschwitz. She began writing her journals exactly 80 years and 1 month ago to this day, on March 8th, 1941. And much of Etty's early journals are what you would expect from a late 20-something cosmopolitan woman living in the city. She's talking about her friends and her relationships and her curiosity about what she's going to do and make of her life. But she grows her inner life through her writing, including a meditation practice that she shares, and poetry and prayer. And as the Nazi occupation becomes more pronounced, as the citizens are being brought to a work camp, Westerbork, a transit camp, and she works there, she starts to pray in her writing and talk to God. And more, she focuses on her own intimate relationship with God. And I'd like to share with you today, as a kavanah, an intention for our practice, a short quote from her journal that I set to music, that I believe ties to that beautiful teaching of the Sfat Emet. There is no hidden poet in me, just a little piece of God that might grow into poetry. There is no hidden poet in me, just a little piece of God that might grow into poetry. Grow, grow, grow. Grow, grow, grow. There is no hidden poet in me, just a little piece of God that might grow into poetry. And I'd like to invite you, as you get comfortable in your seat, and if you'd like to close your eyes or focus on a spot a few feet away with a soft gaze. As you find yourself limiting the new visual information that's coming in, I'd like to invite you to just notice what's true about your experience of your body right now. Just how you're feeling, what you're noticing. There may be a heaviness, a lightness, tightness, tiredness. Whatever's true, just place your attention on what's happening right now. And allow any sensations that you're feeling to be, without needing to change a thing, just accepting each sensation as it is in its moment and allowing it to be, to continue, or as sensations do, to rise and to fall away. And as you connect to your experience of this moment, I'd like to invite you into a visualization. I'd like to invite you to imagine that small point of light, that small point mentioned by the Sfat Emet, the point implanted by God within our hearts. What does that point look like? What does that pure point, that gift implanted in us? I'd like to just invite you to imagine it. I'd like you to imagine it perhaps as a small point of light, of spirit, of God, a small piece of the divine. And if you can imagine that point as a small light, perhaps you can imagine it glowing as an ember. Perhaps it's tiny, fiery, or maybe it sparkles and is glittery. What color is it? Is it a deep amber, amethyst, forest green, or eggplant? Does it change like a mood ring, allowing sensation, emotion to pass through it and allow it to glow with whatever crosses? Imagine this soul point for a moment, perhaps moving from a solid to a liquid. Imagine it as molten and thick, dynamic, perhaps just like the oxygenated blood that is pumping right now through each of our bodies, perhaps bearing the breath, the soul of the divine in us, not as a static point, but as a dynamic process, as movement, as life, as breath. And if we can imagine that molten, moving, dynamic point as a liquid, perhaps we can now imagine it transmuting from a liquid to a gas, to air itself, from nishama, soul, to nishima, breath. And we can imagine that soul, breath, point coursing through our bodies, along with our breath, embodied in our breath. I'd like to invite you just to focus for a moment on the inhale. On the breath, returning into our bodies, renewing them. And perhaps we can follow the path of the breath as it enters our nostrils, perhaps with a cool feeling, and passes through our nasal passages and into our throat, perhaps into the chest, deep into the belly. Perhaps this point of light, of breath, continues to grow and change and shift as it continues to take up space and allow for the expansiveness in ourselves, in our spirit, and also literally in the expansion we feel in our body from the breath. I'd like to bring you back to just the visualization of that small point again. That small point that maybe glows. And allow your image of that light to grow and expand. And light, it can transcend and fill the boundaries of the body. Perhaps imagine your whole body filling with the light, with the power emanating from that point of light. And imagine it spilling over the boundaries of your body. Imagine the light spilling out of your body and into the air of the room, or if you're outside, into the very atmosphere. Allow yourself to imagine that light pouring out, spreading, enduring, growing, persisting through the ceilings, out into your neighborhood, through the air, through forests, through time itself. Imagine this little point bounding through memory, enduring, persisting, and growing. What allows you to continue in resistance, in suffering, in limitation, what endures. We'll continue practicing, focusing on the point of light as you can best anchor it in your experience. Maybe a sensation in your body where you feel that point, or it may be in the dynamic process of breathing. There is no need, just a little piece of God that might grow into poetry. to invite you, if you haven't opened your eyes, and first connect with your physical body, remembering as netzach, as endurance, as resistance, as gvura. We honor the memories now of all those murdered in the Shoah and the Holocaust, along with the memory of our own dear beloveds. We honor them all. We remember, and their memories endure as a blessing.
Amen. Thank you, Dorothy. So as Dorothy said, I want to invite everybody who is comfortable doing so to join today in the Kaddish, to form a community of remembrance and support and of Gevurah together. And if you have names, name or names of those who'd like to, that you're holding in your heart today or calling to mind, you could add those in the chat box, or either now as we get ready for Kaddish or afterwards as a remembrance. I invite you to join me in rising in body or in spirit for Kaddish. Yit Gadal, Kadash Shmei Rabbah, Yama Ivra Shvite Yamishvite, Hayechon
B'chaye de kol beit Yisrael, Shmei Rabba Barak Maya Barak Say shalom b'moma. Say shalom. Leinu v'kol Israel.
Leinu v'kol Amen.
Invite you, if you haven't, to continue to add names to the chat box as they come to mind. Say their names indeed as a way of perpetuating memory and the endurance of their memory through our practice together. So thank you to Rabbi Dorothy Richman for that exquisite teaching today and for the melody, and looking forward to some conversation with Dorothy in a moment. And of course, as always, you're welcome to stay on for questions about today's teaching or reflections on the practice for a few minutes when we conclude. Thanks to Adi Stein, as ever, for holding our space with grace and skill with the tech. And I want to remind you, we'll be back tomorrow to sit into Shabbat to end our week of practice, the week of Gevurah, with the wonderful teacher and composer and musician Aviva Chernik joining us from Toronto tomorrow, Friday, 12:30 Eastern Time. Reminder as well that we are now streaming these meditations as well as the yoga studio on Monday with Lizzie Shamash and Jonathan Slater's Torah study on Tuesdays. All are being live streamed on our YouTube channel. All the recordings for those sessions are posted there if you miss any and would like to, or you'd like to revisit any of them. So please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you'll get notifications and you'll know where to find the recordings when you'd like to access them. So wish you peace, shalom, for the rest of this day. Hope to see you tomorrow, and if not, sometime soon, as we continue on our journey through the Omer together. It's great to be with you all. If you do have a question, I'm also putting in the chat box a link to a class that Rabbi Dorothy is teaching on the writings of Eddie Hillesum through the Bali Beit Midrash. So that's there. And Dorothy, maybe you can put your email address again in the chat box for those. You can you can sign up for her mailing list to be alerted when she's teaching. Okay, and if you have a question for Dorothy, please put it in the chat box. Dorothy, I want to give you a heads up. I'm going to ask you again if you would, before we end, if we can end again with one more round of that melody of Eddie Hillesum. That's okay with you?
Of course.
Just giving you a heads up. Keep your guitar handy. So, Kol HaKavod on connecting so many dots into such a beautiful pattern for us today. I always find it helpful to just to kind of, for clarity's sake, just to kind of not to put it on a bumper sticker, but to kind of sum up, the essence of the teaching as a takeaway. One was just that beautiful spot for me was that beautiful teaching about that point of holiness that is renewed in everyone on Passover. And, our teacher, Jonathan Omerman, way back when, for me, taught this meditation. And I think he said, don't ever tell anybody this meditation. It was one of those secret meditations. But of course, I haven't get that one. So he was describing that point. I don't know if it's that point, but the way I understood it was a meditation basically on imagining a star in the ceiling of the mind, which has always been my image when there's that idea of an internal point of God or holiness within. So I always go back to that, to like closing my eyes and imagining or experiencing the star in the ceiling of the mind. So I want to thank you for bringing me back to that. But what you added to it was this kind of, the gaseous kind of the diffusion of the light, right, through our bodies and through ourselves. I just want to thank you for that. Just want to make sure also I got that right. That was my takeaway. Yeah? Is that what you're going for?
I think that my experience of Eddie, my biggest challenge was just wanting to share like a lot of her teachings and writings. Mm-hmm. And what she really managed to do is to engage her spiritual practice in the most challenging circumstances, right? And the amazing thing about this set of journals is that you actually see the progression that, she wasn't born with this talent necessarily. She developed spiritual practices that she could lean into when she needed them. And that her own understanding of what was happening is that if I take that image of the point, mm-hmm. she was actually able to grow even in this inhospitable climate, mm-hmm. right? The soul grows everywhere, right? The soul can be actually nurtured from within, even in, horrific circumstances. And she leaves us a record of that, literally a practice record of that. And I want to be clear, not every day is, rainbows and sunshine. I mean, she's very clear on the atrocities and the deep suffering, but she refuses to make that the totality of her experience. And that's great. We can think, okay, great. But how do you do that? How do you not make that the totality of your experience? How do you still notice flowers blooming even at a camp? Right. And so, yeah, I think the point is very important for me, but I tried through the visualization to just also think about expansiveness, even in constriction, in places of constriction.
Mm-hmm. So to connect it with what you were teaching about the Sphirot, both the Gevurah for this week, which one of the things you added just to underscore it was, we've been presenting, I think, generally Gevurah as discerning and establishing boundaries. And you added to that the dimension of being aware of boundaries, not particularly desirable boundaries, limitations in life, and being able to endure and be with that's the Netzach part, is the developing the spiritual capacity to endure in our capacity to be with those limitations. Is that?
I think that's exactly right. And I think it's not a coincidence that that this word netzach is eternity,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's finding the eternity in the moment,
Wow.
right? And that's what allows persistence, continuation, endurance.
That's amazing. It's kind of amazing that this is the combination for this day, right?
I signed up for this day. You might remember because I wanted specifically, I knew I wanted to share Eddie because she's been so important to me.
Mm.
And then when I saw that it was Netzach Shebegvura, it's incredible. And if you think that, oh, wait, it always is the same, right? Because it's based on the Hebrew calendar. Actually, it's not. Normally, Yom HaShoah V'Gvura is on the 27th day of Nisan, but it's only because tomorrow is Friday and it can't be next to Shabbat that we're actually observing it a day early in the cycle.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Isn't that fascinating?
I didn't even notice that.
Because I was thinking maybe that's why they picked it. It was so perfect.
Wow. Well, there is a couple of good questions here. One is poetry and prayer are so connected. Do you see prayer as a metaphor? A life of prayer as one with room for modulating between doubt and belief? Yeah. Okay. Give you a couple hours to answer that one.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you understand prayer? Understand prayer as a metaphor? What's the connection of doubt and belief with prayer?
I understand prayer, first of all, as poetry. Like, certainly our liturgy is poetry in the sense that it is considered, edited speech with metaphors and all kinds of literary, intentional techniques that we use. Personal prayer, right, is, I think, absolutely also still poetry, and poetry itself can be a form of prayer. How many poems do we read that are actual prayers? So I think they're incredibly, for me, connected. And I don't see it as a metaphor. I see it as a tool, right? Prayer is one of the pieces in the toolbox for connecting in and expressing, right? Connecting with the divine and expressing to the divine, both which I think are, hugely important for the spiritual life.
And since you're a musician and composer and performer, how does that come into play for you? The music, poetry, poetry is lyrics,
Well,
sets and music,
I can ask you, if you saw on the source sheet the piece, there is no hidden poet in me, just a little piece of God that might grow into poetry, right? If you see that, you might highlight it or you might like it, right? But my intention is maybe now it's an earworm, right? And maybe somewhere you'll be like somewhere in your day, and all of a sudden you'll be reminded of it or accompanied by it. And another thing you can do, right, with the music is I just added the word grow, grows in there, but I just kind of highlighted it, right, as a piece, because I can do that, right? And so that's also an interpretation, right? I'm taking her words and I'm emphasizing certain things, I'm putting it in a certain key. And so it's expressing a whole bunch of things that maybe she would have meant or not. So I see it, I see all of putting Torah to music, putting other people. I consider Eddie Torah, actually. I consider it a form of midrash, of commentary and interpretation and engagement.
Have you taught that class before? Or is this new? As teaching it as a class.
I mean, I have done that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like it's going to be extraordinary. I want to thank you also for bringing her in because I don't the first heard of her. My last year of rabbinical school, Rabbi Nancy Hughes Kramer was teaching us, doing a spiritual autobiography and held her writing out as an example of spiritual autobiography. So it's always been with me. The other thing about that line that that you turned into the song is that it reminded me of that teaching. I think it's Midrash, it's Agadah Midrash in the Talmud about that there is an angel standing over every blade of grass, right?
Exactly.
Saying grow, grow, and the hold that image of even in the face of totally withered totally withered field, that voice is sounding grow, 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 grow. Wow. And you really brought that out with how you wrote it.
And isn't that, it's like, I saw someone in the chat, talked about the Pintala Yid,
Yep.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean if not like the pure, it's just the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
The point from which everything flows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's for me, that's such a part of spiritual practice, is trying to connect into that piece of Netzach that can't be sullied,
Mm-hmm.
that can't be damaged,
Mm-hmm.
that no matter what is always there, and
Mm-hmm.
imagining it almost like a pilot light
Yeah.
where you can always, and
Yeah.
that's the challenge of spiritual practice,
Yeah.
is figuring out how to connect into it and believe
Mm-hmm.
in it and then expand it,
Yeah.
then allow it to grow
Yeah.
from that pintala, right? From that little point.
Beautiful. Uh, yeah. Jen Bernvogel is saying the near time need
Yeah.
pilot
Beautiful.
light that doesn't go out. That's great. Okay. Want to take us out one more round?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. And I will just say, if anybody does want to come to that Valley Beth Shalom piece, I've set a few other songs, other quotes to music as well. So you might get more.
Okay, we're
You'll
going to
hear
put
this
the
one again, but there are a few more. There is no hidden poet in me, just a little piece of God that might grow into poetry. There is no hidden poet in me, just a little piece of God that might grow into poetry. Grow, 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 grow. There is no hidden poet in me, just a little piece of God that might grow into poetry.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. It was really just so beautiful.
A
Perfect for today.
pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk with you. You're such a thoughtful interviewer, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you. I enjoy it and I get so much from it. And this just felt so right and perfect for today. So thank you so much.
And thank you
And
also for bringing our mutual teacher, Jonathan Omerman. May he live and be well.
right.
Amen. Esrim.
People probably don't know. He was really one of the founding lights of IJS and taught the first. I don't know if he taught in your cohort. Did he?
He
No.
did.
Did he? Okay.
He did.
So this is one of the first meditations he taught. This is over 20 years ago, and it completely stayed with me. So I hope I'm not divulging some mystical secret that he meant to keep. But it should be out there. Okay, great to be with you all. Hope to see you tomorrow with Aviva Chernik, and be well for the rest of the day. Thanks so much, Dorothy. Okay.